Oops. Okay, I guess we're gonna have to start. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit record yet. My finger was on the trigger. All right. Welcome, dear friends. It's Erev Shabbos, Chaf Dalid Adar, the 24th of Adar, March 17th. It's a Friday, 5783, 2023. We're deep into the future, which is now called the present. And we are studying the Talmud, the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Thank you, Carrie. Presently, Carrie, you see what they do to me here?
I know.
I said they put me back in the closet. Okay.
Definitely got to upgrade you in the new building.
We're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And presently, we are studying Pesachim, page 4, I think. No, 3b. And we went on a long unit. I don't want to call it a tangent. I think it's of supreme significance. The the Talmud view, based on a series of stories, biblical analysis, making the case that the Torah is into being careful and deliberate about the words we use. I think that would be the most appropriate description. In the process of being careful and deliberate with the words we use, there are a few different values that we should take into account, tells the Talmud. The Talmud says, number one, when all things are equal, choose the most refined, dignified, delicate words. Sometimes, under certain circumstances, we need to also weigh that and consider how concise, strategic, and accurate our words are. In addition to that, even when words are truthful and unavoidable, yesterday we found that there is a general hesitance to directly share bad, sad news. And we had two different anecdotes, two different stories. We had a story that the bad news was about the passing of one's father, mother, or the siblings of the person who was inquiring. Again, Rabbi Chia inquiring about the condition of his siblings, the parents of Rav. And Rav was anything but concise. He used verbal gymnastics to, as Rashi put it, to not saying the truth, but yet not directly conveying the sad news, rather through remiza, through hinting, and by virtue of his avoidance, conveying the unfortunate news of the demise of his parents. And then we had the story about the rabbi who was inquired about the condition of the crops. And instead of responding to the question, how is our crops doing, he started talking about other yields and how great they were, conveying a message that the grain was no good. But in the course of telling us the story, we received some critique. I'm not sure how to bring this to the bank, to be honest. They were upset that he was speaking about animal feed. They felt he should have talked about another type of human feed. He should have talked about lentils. And so even though he was correct, and the story is being used to tell us that that one should try to avoid giving bad news, I don't know exactly what the takeaway is of the criticism of how he did it. In other words, I don't know how one might correctly and accurately do it. The Gemara or the commentaries, I have to open the Gemara and take a look, say he could have talked about last year's yield or another yield. But anyways, that was the story. We have one more anecdote, one more story before we go back to Pesachim.
In addition, the story tells something about changing mores. Like today, barley is a respectable human staple.
Right.
The statement wouldn't raise brows.
Oh, agreed. So certainly it's not, the takeaway is certainly not the specifics. It's the idea of, I guess, if you want to dray a cup, and if you want to avoid giving an answer, you still need to be on topic.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rebero.
Do we not also have to be careful? Because by not being direct, you might mislead the person.
Well, I don't think Rav was going to allow Rav Chia to walk away not knowing that.
No, I'm talking more about the grain. Maybe they would take some measures if they knew they had a problem. Anyway,
I would say, you're asking a good question, but I would say the same thing. What was clear is that they're going to find out the condition of the grain. He just didn't want to say it clearly, and he was using remiza. I should correct myself. Just when I introduced us, I said we were on 4A, and then I said no, we're 3B. We're actually right on the top of 4A. One last thing from the story. We had the story of Rav, and from there we inferred some halachic insight about the nature of far removed bad news. Now, actually, I need to ask for your here. Give me one more second. I'm sorry.
Bernie, what's the weather like?
Very windy out. But yeah, it's in the 70s, but it's very, very windy out, and the ocean's.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I apologize. Sometimes.
Okay.
All right. Let's go. Let's jump in. Let's see our next story, and then we're going to continue with Pesachim. Thank you for your indulgence once again. Here we go. Screen is being shared. I think you can see. Okay. Hahu, a guy. Omar, he said, Dunu dini. Please do my case. Dunu dini, Rashi. B'chol, what does that mean? B'chol dvar masa umatan shahaya loy. Every time this man ever engaged in business in Adam with another person, haya oimer tamid baladim. He would always say, "Come, let's get this figured out in court." He always wanted judges to verify. Now, I'm not certain if this is, I cannot tell yet, bear with me, if this is criticism, a compliment, or a neutral statement. I think it's more of a neutral statement, but let's take a look. Shmamina, the folks around the Chachamim would say, we can infer Midan Kasi, that he actually comes from the tribe of David Chsiv, Don, Gidin Amoy, Kachat Shiftei Yisrael. The tribe of Dan, the verse says, Dan will judge his people like one of the Shvatim of Israel. So they said probably his obsession with the word judgment was the result of his heritage from the tribe of Dan. Interesting. Let's see. With regards to the precision required in language, the Gemara says he would always say, "Dun, dun dini," or "Duno dini." So he must be from Dun. He expressed himself that way due to his lineage. So, what does it really mean here? I think what we're saying is that language tells us a lot about a person. A person conveys much with his expression beyond his intended objective. So how we express ourselves tells a lot about our personality, our character, our virtue, and the like. And that seems to be what the Gemara is saying. This is a curious.
Rabbi.
Yes.
In general, throughout the Gemara, are the Chazal generally pro-litigation or try to advocate trying to avoid litigation?
So it's very interesting. The nutshell is that Chazal believe, the Torah believes that it needs to be an option that's available. People need to be able to adjudicate their court. But in the discussion of judging, there are different forms or forums for adjudication. And there is a prioritization of pshara, of compromise, and of what we might call, and I think this, and again, we need an attorney here, but I believe the way it works is that when a person comes to court in certain matters, there's always a desire before going to a litigation to try to have a, how do you call it? A mediation. And so in Chazal, there is a value of mediation, but ultimately a just society means making justice available whenever a person desires or feels it's necessary in the course of business.
Even within Shara, when they discuss Shara, do they prefer Shara within the confines of the
Shara
Beis
is
Din?
preferred because then there is
Yeah,
buy-in. from both.
I understand, but do they prefer it within the Beis Din auspices or first try on your own? What is the preference?
I'm not sure.
My question is, are they trying in general, do Chazal try to maintain?
Meaning, does Chazal have a
authority
view on a litigious society like America, or wherever we go to court and sue about everything? Does Chazal promote such a culture, or is Chazal more advocating a society where people work things out between each other or get a third party?
Let me tell you the reason I'm asking,
Okay.
because, for instance, I seem to see over the year, when in learning, generally Chazal try to maintain, that's called power within their own, but on their side. For instance, when it comes to families, whether it's the most obvious example is if your parents say one thing and the Rav says another thing, you have to listen to the Rav rather than the parent. So I wanted to know here, do they prefer, are they giving up any authority to just interpersonal actions, or come to the Beis Din, whether it's for a pshara or for a din?
I'm not sure. I think you'll get different sentiments in different places in the Talmud. There is certainly room for meaning for sure Chazal prioritize shalom. The question is, once there is contention or dispute, what is the next step? You have to remember something. Today we look at and I mentioned this yesterday or 2 days ago. Today we look at Chazal as like, we were talking about court yesterday. I don't remember exactly the context. So we're saying that today any bet din is only the legal framework for a beis din is how do you call it? What do we call it? Not mediation. There was another word. I don't remember anymore. You have to sign an agreement and arbitration. Which we but in the time of Chazal and the time and in the ideal of Gemara, arbitration. Shkayach, doctor. Shouldn't have noticed that, but I did. In the time of Gemara, you have to understand, Chazal were not an institution. It was the legal system. So it would be like saying, in America, the courts try to preserve all the authority to adjudicate legal matters. Well, yeah, because in a society, the justice system and the legal system is the forum for figuring legal matters out. And so Beis Din was not just like Beis Din the way we envision it. Beis Din was the court system, the legal system. But nonetheless, it's a good question, worthy of further exploration. And I'm not negating your point. I just wanted to bring to attention that matter. And when we learn, God willing, Masechet Sanhedrin, we'll have a lot of focus on the ethics of Beis Din and the values and the priorities of Beis Din. So let's not forget entirely the question, and I'm sure we'll have many opportunities to review it before we get there. So Yasher Koyach for that. And I would say maybe some of the quote unquote dysfunctions that we perceive with Beis Din today is a result of this awkward positioning in society, where they are the ones that are intended to adjudicate matters of halacha, but they are not really given authority in the legal eyes beyond the acceptance of litigants. But conversely, there are halachas about one Jew suing. So there is an awkwardness about the positioning of Beis Din in society. And then there's other issues which I don't even want to go to now, but just to acknowledge that. All right, let's see one more story. Hahu dehave ka'azil v'omar. There was a guy who was going around saying, Akef yama aseisni birasa. The bushes on the seashore are cypresses. This is the Gaonim's interpretation. Rashi has a different take. Rashi translates it as this: Askein bironot im hayuli palton live nice. If I askein bironot, I'll build mansions. Im hayuli palton live nice. If I had to build a palace, I would want to have a seaside address. I think this is practically giving us the material to advertise moving to our neighborhood. We should write in our advertisements, Akif Yama Aseisne Birasa. Al Sfasayam. He was always into the seaside, the ocean side. Rashi then quotes in the Goinim, Akif Yama Asana Birasa Pirish Kachayam Mishtabech Besfasayam. He was praising the areas on the coast. Tomitz Anoim Shal Sfasayam. Barushim Haim. There are many of these trees. Anyway, so we have at least two different interpretations of what this Gemara means. But for the purposes of our Gemara, Badaku, they looked into his heritage, Bashkechu, and they found out that Zvulun Kasi came from the tribe of Zvulun Dechsiv. Zvulun Lechaypyam Mishkain, Zvulun will live on the seaside. And so the reason why he was so obsessed with the coast is because it was in his DNA, it was in his heritage, it was in his biblical heritage, by virtue of his tribe. And so here we see the opposite of the previous Gemara. Until now, the Gemara was saying, be precise with your language. Now we're saying, you can also be medayik. You can infer much from the way a person communicates. So we can listen carefully. I mean, let me reframe this just one more time. We might say that until now, the Gemara was talking about speaking carefully. We might say that these last two anecdotes are about listening carefully. If you listen carefully, you will learn a lot. And so that's not really exactly how Rabbi Steinsaltz presents it, but I think that would be an interesting way to see the balance of the discussion. Speak carefully, but also listen carefully. If you listen carefully, you'll know a lot. I'm sure those who have experience in providing therapy or listening to people, and rabbis are also encouraged to listen carefully to people. Do we always do well? No, but we try. And one of the things that we were taught as rabbis is that you can't only listen to the words that are being used. You have to try to understand where the person is coming from and what that, for example, question or statement is coming from. And I can tell you from the times that I misunderstood or took what the person said literally instead of considering what was motivating those words, and those were usually conversations that I must say were unsuccessful. Whereas if I took the time to try to listen and understand not just what's being said, but where it's coming from, careful listening can be very advantageous to the listener and beneficial to the speaker. And so that's how I would frame in my commentary. That's how I would frame this Gemara. Take it.
Nicely said, Rabbi.
Thank you. I mean, this is both in counseling people, but also in general, they say that when a person asks you a question, and I've shared this many times, the same question could really be asking many different things. So sometimes a person will ask you a question and they'll ask you, why do bad things happen to good people? And one person is asking it because they were having an argument with their friend. And another person, unfortunately, just had a terrible thing happen in their family. And a third person, is having doubts in their faith. And they're trying to resolve their faith. So you can have three people saying the exact same words, but if with a little probing, you'll understand that what they're trying to accomplish is very different. And to give a person who's grieving or in a lot of pain a technical question could be the most insensitive and unhelpful thing to do. And conversely, a person that wants to ask you an intellectual question and you start talking about emotions, that will also be a highly ineffective response. And so this part of the Gemara is about careful listening, something that I have to work. I'm constantly working on, and one day, hopefully before my hearing runs out, I will learn how to listen. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara. And then sometimes you listen too carefully and you don't actually hear the words the person says. So it goes in all different directions. Anyways, here we go. Dr. Hammer, as someone that has at least done a little listening in your career, do you have anything to add? Here, you're muted. You don't have to add anything. I just want to invite.
I think that the expert in listening skills lives in your house, in my house, in the house of every married man, and it's called the wife. And I think your wife taught you pretty well so far about listening. You're doing okay for a guy in his late 90s. You're doing okay.
Now, Dr. Stamler, I was sitting with a dentist yesterday, a retired dentist, and he was telling me that he was very popular. But the reason why he was popular is because he provided all different types of substances to ease the angst and discomfort and fear of his patients. I don't know what you did in your practice, but I suspect that you also have the opportunity to hear when a person is on some kind of laughing gas or a little more sustained. You probably also have the chance to, I don't know about listen, but hear things that no one else gets to hear. So anyways.
Rabbi, we're back to the mushrooms.
Back to the drug dealing.
The only thing I could add, Rabbi, if I may, is if you've ever been in a session where hypnosis is practiced, you also get to listen to stuff that's equivalent to mushrooms and laughing gas and more. So that's I've not done it, but I've been there.
And bartenders too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Doctor, actually, this dentist, he's a retired dentist, and the statute of limitations has passed. Yeah. But he was involved in teaching. I guess he had a few clinics, so he was related to some of the teaching schools in the tri-state area, we'll say. And he told me that his students loved him because before he would start, he would offer them an opportunity to take a sampling of what they were going to be providing the students, and that I'm sure is not okay. But anyways, his students loved him, he said.
You could add cab drivers to that club.
I love a guy who tells you everybody loves me.
Right. All righty. The Gemara is now going to get very real. We've been talking a very interesting, important Agadic section. I think this past section about careful speech, careful listening, we might put it in one of the top 10. If we're going to make a top 10 list of sections that are extremely important bearings and significance to a Jewish way of looking at life and a Jewish way of managing, I might put this Gemara somewhere in there. And we're lucky that we're right out of the gates of Pesachim, and already we have something of such magnitude and significance. But now we're going to get right back into the Talmudic dialogue and debate. And the Gemara is going to ask a very thought-provoking question here. Our Mishnah told us that we got to check. Actually, I think I skipped here. There we go. You said that you got to check, and we got to check at nighttime. The Hashda, the Kaimalon. The Gemara continues as if No time has passed. You know, we spent 3 days talking about speech, but the Gemara doesn't even say, okay, we're gonna get back. The next sentence. Now that we've established that everybody agrees that or le means the evening. And the whole question was how we choose to describe or in Aramaic. Mechdi, let's put on our thinking caps. That's what Mechdi means. Bein Rabbi Yehuda, Bein Rabbi Meir, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, who we quoted briefly as having different viewpoints about the precise deadline of chametz consumption. Chametz is only prohibited. And we have someone new on here, at least a new name. Can I ask you to introduce yourself? Maybe it's one of our regulars with a different device.
This is Alex Katz, Rabbi. I met you this morning in front of Shul when I pulled up to pick up my future son-in-law, Sam Gross. I met you this morning when I would pull up in the black sun. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, wonderful to have you on. You're joining us for our Gemara discussion?
Absolutely. I'm going to be off camera because I'm going to be driving my son to the airport. So I hope you don't mind if I listen into the
Thrilled to have you on board. I just wanted to make sure, there's stories today of all different shigas that can happen on Zoom. So if I see a new name, I just wanted to make sure that we're honored to have you on. Thank you for
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm legit and I'm here and I'm going to.
No, as soon as I heard your voice, I said, I know you. Don't worry. All right. So so here we go. Welcome. So we're now that there is absolute consensus that the meaning of the word or is nighttime, which, by the way, stop 99.9% of Jewish people who speak Hebrew and say, you know what I learned in the Gemara today, that the word or means nighttime. They'll probably slap you in the face and say you're Meshuggah. But here you go. Everyone agrees. Or means night. And everyone agrees. Chametz einay asur ela mishei shayis ulamayla. The prohibition of chametz consumption is only from midday of Erev Pesach. So if you're not allowed to eat chametz at hour number 6 of daylight, v'nibdaik b'shis, let's just do bedika, then let's do the bedika, let's do the search for chametz. An hour before it's prohibited. Let's look at Rashi, nivdaik chametz b'tchila sheish. It's prohibited at the end of the 6th hour. So just start doing bedika b'tchila sheish 1 hour before you cannot eat it. Before the deadline. See, I use the word deadline before the end of the term of. I guess I'm struggling to find the right words. Before you need to get rid of the chametz, that's when you should get rid of it. Lama lilak dumi kulei. Why are we pushing back the search for chametz? 16 hours.
It might take more than an hour to do it.
Yeah, good. Let's hold that thought. That's a good thought. The if or means morning, daytime. If or means daytime. Okay, so maybe day doesn't mean nets. Maybe it means within the first 6 hours. But if we've established that it means nighttime, we are certainly way ahead. 16 hours ahead, 15 hours ahead. We're talking about a lot of time. What's going on? Why would we do bedika the night before? Rabbi Steingel's here. Yeah, it's only prohibited from the 6th hour of the day and onwards. So start in the time that's permitted. So the Gemara says, okay, let's think this through. There is a Jewish value for being proactive. You'll say, Jew should try to be vigilant and always do a mitzvah early. And so maybe you'll tell me, you know what? In adherence to this Jewish value, we are choosing to do the bedika before the necessary time. So the Gemara says, well, there's a way to do that without being meshuggah. Nivdaik min safra. So what we should do is wake up in the morning, do bedika, and then go to shul. And indeed, there's a precedent that the adherence to the value of zerizim, of doing something with alacrity, means from early in the morning. Folks, I'm going to have a flashback of Masechet Shabbos. a Jew circumcises their child on the 8th day, Vitanya, and Brisa teaches us, Kol hayom kuloi kosher lemila. Technically, all daylight hours are bris hours. You don't have to do it halachically, biblically from the morning. Rizim, maktimim lemitzvahs, and yet we try to do the bris as early as possible. In adherence to the value of Zerizim Aktimim Mitzvahs, a Jew tries to be vigilant and do a mitzvah as early as possible. And indeed, we find that Avram Avinu was commanded to bring his son as a sacrifice. And one of the things that make Avram special is not only he listened to God, but he did it right away. And similarly, we try to reflect that value in our Torah adherence. But no one ever says that because Zerizim Aktimim Mitzvahs, you should do the bris the night before. Now you're going to say very simple. Bris, you can't do early. So you don't do early. But B'dikas Chametz, you should be able to. But that's the Gemara's line of reason. The Gemara says, you're not going to convince me that the B'dikas Chametz is at nighttime simply to try to do things early. The Gemara is going to give an answer, so don't be worried. But at this point, the Gemara is still thinking it through. Rashi, Nivdek Mitzafra. Check right away in the morning. What would that do? The Ika Hakdama. Lizrizim. Those who are vigilant will be doing it early. As we find by Bris, Uvazirusid Avram, and like Avram, Shanemar Vayashim Avram Boiker, Shalahim Tanat Anesachama. We come up and believe Lahim. We do not find in Judaism that rushing to do something early would mean doing it the night prior.
So, Rabbi, the Sephardic custom of some groups to do a Brit Milah in the evening.
Before sundown, you mean?
Excuse me?
But before sundown.
Right.
Right.
How is that Zrizim Makdimim the mitzvah?
So that's actually a very interesting point. There's a whole pilpul in Masechet Shabbos that there's two values. There's Zrizim Makdimim, which is do it early, and then there's something called the Rov Hadrat Melech, that you want to prioritize. And so there's a certain rabbi in New Jersey who's the brother-in-law of a very chashuv yid, who one time was invited to a bris. Maybe you've heard this story once. I don't know if you have. And he came for the bris at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock.
I told you that story.
I know,
my brother-in-law. In Deal, he went to the first bris.
So you see, so it was
Bernie. He knew that it was a euphemistic saying. He knew it, the rabbi told the story on purpose that way.
Right.
You maybe know this chashuv yid too.
Yeah.
He's a doctor. He's a Talmud Chacham. Maybe you'll have the privilege to meet him one day. Anyways, so you have two values. You have the value of Zerizim, and then you have the Rov Am, and there are those who prioritize Zerizim, and there are those that prioritize Rov Am, and Chabad actually as well. You try to do both, but under certain circumstances, you will actually find a bris later on. This is brought in the writings of the Balatanya, and I think the Rebbe highlights this. If everyone is away at work and if you're built to have a proper Su'udah and Divrei Torah, so then you could wait to do it in a better form.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rebbe.
The Ramchal is all about Zrizus.
Yeah. No, Zrizus is a massive. Let's say like this: anyone who puts an emphasis on character building, Zrizus is going to be one of the most important things, because when a person has to do something, they'll do it. But as we discussed with those in education, the same. Actually, I think it might be the same chashuv yid who brought this up about students doing things last minute.
Right.
So even a person who's committed to do their responsibility, to do it in a timely manner, that's of supreme virtue. And so anyone that talks about character building, we'll talk about that. I'll tell you, like, for example, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is a very opening comment is Yehuda ben Tema. There's some variations in this exact language, but basically talks about the different animals that we learn from, and starting with Yehuda ben Tema Omer, Oz Kenemer, Kal Ketzvi, whatever. The point is the very first thing he talks about is zrizos and zrizim akdimim, and to wake up in the morning with alacrity. I must say the clock change, which is almost a week old, did a lot to harm at least the students who go to school that I know about's ability to wake up with zrizos, as well as the parents. But anyways, so the Gemara answers that we actually choose to do the bedika at nighttime because of a confluence of necessary ingredients for a quality search. Professor.
There is statistics that every time change, whether every clock change, either in one direction or another, results in increase of road accidents and heart attacks.
Really, I believe it. I'll tell you something else. Every Sunday,
not everyone, but it is a noticeable difference.
Meaning it creates added strain on people, and anyone that's, God forbid, vulnerable could.
Yeah.
I will say this: every year, Sunday, we change the clock twice a year. That Sunday, people arrive at 7 o'clock to shul, 8 o'clock to shul, 9 o'clock to shul. Because some people turn the clock forward instead of backwards, backwards instead of forwards. And so we always have a tendency, anyways. So someone asked me, Rabbi, you said that, so why don't you just lechatchila schedule a 7 o'clock meeting and 8 o'clock meeting and 9 o'clock? I said, then you're gonna have people coming at 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So anyways, all right. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Here is the answer. We choose to do bedika at a time where people are home. Anyways, and darkness, thus allowing for candlelight, is the most ideal form of search. Let's read Rashi. B'layla, at night. Ironically, to have a candle in the daytime will not be advantageous. The Imtoimar says Rashi, Yivdek lor hayom, just use sunlight. We're going to find out later that there's something very important and ideal about using candlelight. And so, Chazal want bedika to happen at a time where people are around and able to do so. And there's something very special about candlelight. I know we're going to talk about, when I say in our discussion, we're going to certainly bring up the question of a flashlight. And today, every person has a smartphone, and a smartphone has a flashlight. See that?
And the magnifier.
And the magnifier.
And the thing is, though, if you ever try it out, you'll see if you're trying to look for something like crumbs or whatever in the dark with a flashlight or it's so much easier to see it. If you just look in the sunlight, it just all gets hidden, in the ambient light. So there is a reason why it's better to search at night with a torch or a candle.
I want you to know that Mark isn't just telling. All of us could talk about light because we all experience light. But recently, I was giving a shiur at Yeshiva night, and we were talking about abstract facets of light. And Mark, in his engineering background, was able to give us a lot of very, very detailed insights. So I take Mark's comments about light with a lot of weight.
Oh, you know what?
So we have to thank him for enlightening us.
Let's just do the stairs.
All right, the Gemara continues. Amar Abaya, based on the above, Hilkach, therefore, Haid Sober Mirabanan, a Torah scholar, Loi Liftach Beidnei, a person shouldn't start learning his study session, Beorta the Tleisar, at the end of the day of 13, the Nagi Arbesar, which is the night of the 14th. It's interesting. He uses extra language to be very clear. On the cusp of the night of B'dikas Chametz, don't start learning. Dilma Mashchale Shmatei, the nature of Torah study is that a person will start thinking and researching and discussing. The Asid Limdoyim mitzvah, and he ends up being late for the mitzvah. Here, Rabbi Steinsaltz. Therefore, the Torah scholar shouldn't begin his learning on the night of the 13th, leading into the 14th, lest he becomes engrossed. Rashi, Lo Yiftach B'idnei. Lo Yaschel B'girsem Kava Eis LaTorah B'laylos. Don't start learning if your learning is at night. Lo Yaschel L'Sasek B'Shmatze. Don't start learning your sugya. The orta the tleiser the nagi arbeser leile yitzias shloisha also the night that is the end of the 13th day of the month of Nisan. Shu knisas arba also, which is the onset of the 14th. Leil b'dikas chametz. This is a reference to b'dikas chametz. So don't start learning. Very interesting. So although generally speaking, Torah learning is of supreme significance, we're told that there are times that you need to hold off. And this is one of them. Don't study if it's going to be, not if, because it's going to hold you back from timely b'dikas chametz. Let's take a peek real fast in the Shulchan Aruch, and I think we're going to close with this. So I told you we're going to end a few minutes early. We'll end around 8-9 minutes. Yizaher says the Code of Jewish Law. Kol Adam shelo yatchil b'shum melacha. Don't start anywhere. A lot of the subject this Shulchan Aruch is going to discuss is going to be later on in the Gemara, but I'm bringing it up now because of one specific issue. Don't eat until B'dika. Here, you have a set chabrusa. You have a set time of learning, and as we know in Judaism, set times of learning should be very, very high in the priority list. Don't learn until you do b'dikas chametz. Here is a fascinating shaila. What if the guy did start learning and it's still daytime? In sarich lahafsik, you do not need to interrupt your learning. So you shouldn't start learning if it's already the zman of b'dikas chametz. But let's say you have a shir, and you started your shir in the daytime before the zman of b'dikas chametz. You don't need to stop. Finish your learning, and then you can go to b'dikas chametz. This is the words of Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Code of Jewish Law. But let's take a look at what the Ramah says. There's another take, another opinion that says, "Sorech lahafsik." You do need to interrupt. And the Ramah says that indeed is the halachic take. Interesting. So you have a machlokas about interrupting learning, and the Ramah, the Ashkenazic authority, says you got to stop.
Yeah, what I see though in here is another point. So he says that generally, from what I understand from his comments, that people at his time learned in the evening rather than the daytime. And this way, the exception was if you would start during the day, then you should possibly wait. However, what I'm learning for that is people were not available during the daytime to learn. They worked. Today,
While what you're saying is likely true, one could say that this would not be a solid proof to that. But there's plenty of discussion about the nights being a time for learning, with the understanding that most people are employed during the daytime. So that you're making a correct statement. I'm just saying one could argue if this Gemara is proof to that. But yes, let's take a fast peek here, and then I'm going to have to go. Shetzarich lahafsik. After hischal beheter, the Mishnah Berurah says, although you started and you were totally within your rights to start learning. V'taima, what is the reason? Listen carefully. The ikar mitzvah lechatchila, the ideal mitzvah lechatchila, kavu chachamim, the sages set up that you should do b'dika b'tchilas halayla. The time of b'dika is in the beginning of the night. And therefore, one must cease doing learning, even though usually you never want to stop learning, because you want to do the mitzvah and the ideal, which is dafka in the beginning of the night. So interestingly enough, the Ramah tells us that, the Mishnah Berurah tells us that the Ramah is of the opinion that you really got to stop learning, because the ideal proper time to do b'dika is dafka at the beginning of the night. There's another issue too, which is you don't usually do b'dikas chametz at night, because usually it isn't Erev Pesach, and therefore a person is not accustomed to stopping. And so it's not like a person is likely to recall. Anyways, friends, I'm sorry, I do gotta go now. I want to thank you all for joining. I want to wish you a wonderful Shabbos. Also to just mention, I should have mentioned in the beginning that we'll learn or we'll make our learning retroactively with schos, the refuah shlema, a successful procedure for Mina Bas. I think it's Mazal. Should have only good news and healthy news and happy news.
Amen.
And the
Amen.
Yashar Koyachal. Looking forward to seeing everyone on Monday. I hope you found today's Gemara discussion enlightening and thought-provoking. I did. And I want to thank everyone. So wonderful.
We'll force him on your daughter.
No. It's just an
Small
appointment.
thing? Okay.
A father's got you gotta do. You
What
gotta
you gotta
do.
do?
All right, Shkayachal.